Greetings, coaches. My name's David Newberry. I'm the e-learning coordinator for United Soccer Coaches, and welcome to this edition of Give and Go Live. I'm joined, as always, by my colleague, Ian Barker. Hello, Ian.
Hi, David. Pleasure to be here.
Ian, we have a special guest today, Nathan Hunt, who is the Director of Coaching for Kansas State Youth Soccer Association, and he's also an ODP region coach for the Midwest with the 2005 boys. Welcome, Nathan, to this presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, guys.
You're very welcome. So this session, Nathan, is on transition 4v4 flying changes. And so this is an activity that is really focusing on the attacking side of the ball. And we'll start with this first sequence. We have 4 players that are standing behind the goal in red and 4 players that are standing behind the goal in yellow. And on the field, we have a 4 versus 4 with another team or the other team on deck waiting to come on. So, and of course we have goalkeepers on this activity as well. The coach is on the sideline directing play and reminding players when to come on. And the basic premise of the activity is that the reds are trying to attack in one direction, the yellows are trying to attack in the other direction, and when the ball leaves the end line, so in this case the reds play the ball over the end line, whether they score or the ball goes directly off, in this case for a goal kick, the team that is waiting behind the goal, the yellows, will bring the ball on and now will attack the 4 reds that remain, and the 4 yellows that were on the field that were defending now have to leave by the nearest point. So let's talk about some of the methodology we might see on this activity here, Nathan.
So yes, things that we would look for is, do we recognize or do our players recognize the space and the numbers that we have? So in this instance here, we have the player with the ball recognizing that this area is closed off. It's a 2v2. He or she has the ability to then go into the space themselves or to pass to this player who can then go and shoot on goal. Okay. Another thing to think about is the team keeping a good attacking shape, so once they do lose possession, they can defend as quickly as possible as a group.
Thanks, Nathan. Anything else, Ian, you see on this activity?
Yeah, so the whole point of the activity is quick transition moments from attack to defense, hopefully, so quite a lot of activity for all the players all the time. If I'm working with 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, the first thing is one team's going that way and one team's going that way, and reminding them how to transition in and out of the game. That might be it. But as we get a little bit older, maybe with 7, 8-year-olds, now we're talking about team shapes. So we've got the reds in a rectangle, maybe a square, but we might start thinking about diamond shapes. And of course, defensively here, we've got 2 that have decided they're going to be deeper, but we've left this player high, maybe because we want to defend from the top of the field. So you're always looking to manipulate it based on the chronological age and the technical and cognitive ability of your kids.
And Ian, that's a good point you've made there about working this activity with younger players. Of course, with the players that are playing under 8s and younger, we don't have goalkeepers. So this works really well without goalkeepers, with 4 players having to defend, of course, the goal. Now we can work on that shape at a very young and early age. But as we can see here, the ball, if you remember, was played off the end line. And the same happens if the ball goes into the goal. If the goalkeeper saves it, by the way, we do transition with the same players on the field. So if the keeper had saved the ball, then they would have just played it out to the players that were on the field. There isn't a transitional moment in terms of players coming on and off the field. But in this case, the ball went off the end line. We have a player that is coming on with the ball. With young players, they tend to figure out that they need to bring the ball on, and they work out eventually that bringing the ball down the middle isn't necessarily the best strategy. And we have, with this player coming on, 4 or 3 teammates that will now create the 4 versus 4 in the other direction. Nathan, anything you see in particular on sequence 2?
Yeah, so looking at this one now, it looks like yellow has the position where they necessarily can't go forward, so they might have to create some space to go forward. So this is a good time for us, again, to recognize space versus numbers. Maybe instead of going forward immediately, the player here can then play wide to this teammate, who's in, then we can stretch them long ways, or we can take our space off the dribble based on what we see or based on what the player sees at that point in time. So again, another recognition of, okay, we can't create or we can't find the space to attack. Let's go ahead and create it by going wide first, and then we take advantage of our numbers and space that way.
Ian, there's a lot going on this activity, lots to coach. Anything particular that you see?
Yeah, well, I like the idea that these players are trying to get off the field as quickly as possible. So whichever sideline or end line is closest, get off. I also like to consider this player here, who's the person that's going to start the next sequence because he or she's got the ball. So this is where the coach may employ some assistant coaches, some parent helpers to remind these players that transition at each stage that we're ready to go and we get the game going in a nice even pace.
And one of the things, Ian, that I've noticed with an activity like this, once the players really work out that they can bring the ball in almost immediately as the ball crosses the line, we have a situation where a player will dribble all the way up and shoot themselves. Can you give me one or two possible conditions we can bring in to create more of a combination environment so that they don't just run up and shoot?
Yeah, so we've got the start point where everybody's coming from the end line. But if we started with players dotted around the field, we might have some more immediate team shape. Right now, we haven't put any stipulation on how the Reds, who were previously attacking, will have to defend. But we might suggest that once they've had their shot, they must apply immediate pressure to the ball. Or we might suggest once you've had your shot, you must retreat to your own half before you can come and confront the ball. And so you'll create different scenarios and different opportunities for the person introducing the ball to have options.
Good, excellent, thank you. And then let's move to the last sequence. And as we saw before, the yellows were bringing the ball on. We've managed to get a couple of our support players in high positions on the left and the right. And we've made a gorgeous pass here. I mean, it's amazing how they've got that loft into a position where the yellow team has scored. And as that happens, there's no rest for the yellows because now they have to defend the guy coming on from the end line. Anything here, Nathan, that you would like to share with the coaches?
Yes, so I think this is important we really can get to the team shape in terms of if we have players in the proper positions as we're attacking, we can immediately get into defensive shape and potentially not even have to drop back to win the ball back. So this is a great time to emphasize team shape, but then that moment of not clicking off and making sure that the player closest to the ball recognizes, or the player behind them recognizes how to orchestrate and communicate to the players in front of them to quickly transition to the defensive side of the ball. So for example, this player here could immediately give information to this player based on who has the ball. He could also immediately give information to this player here on the right in terms of maybe you drop off and we hold this space. So a lot of information and a lot of different cues that can be gone over in this activity at this moment.
Ian, that's an excellent point. The idea that when we attack...
From my perspective, coaches, when we look at this, I'm glad to say this is a common refrain for me on the Give and Go. The kids are playing a 4v4 game. So they're very happy to play the game. You're going to get a lot of players motivated and energetic. And as opposed to the notion of play, practice, play, where sometimes we just let them play and expect things to magically happen, what we're doing here is we've put in some game conditions, like when they can come in and when they have to step out, which allows us to have our coaching relevance, but still allows the players to play the game. So the more game-like we can be with our activities, the more our players, be they 5-year-old or 12-year-old or 21-year-old, the more they're going to enjoy the training session.
Well, thank you, Nathan, and thank you, Ian, for joining us today and presenting a great session. And thank you, coaches, for joining this edition of Give and Go Live.